Our next guest on the Any Given Monday podcast is a physical therapist, personal trainer, and injury prevention specialist. Men's Health named him one of the top 50 fitness experts in the world. And he has a new book that, with full workout plans, warm-up stretches for every part of the body, day splits, and even QR codes for us runners so we know exactly what we're doing in the gym. It's definitely the go-to book for us. It's called Pain-Free Performance, Move Better, Train Smarter, and Build an Unbreakable Body. Dr. John Rusin, welcome to this week's episode of the Any Given Monday podcast. How are we getting on?
Sean, Eric, it's great to be here. Thank you, gentlemen.
John, what is the secret to breaking that cycle of running and training and being sore? No pain, no gain, everything we have grown up with. How did you break the mold? First of all, I'd love to know, how did you get into it? Because obviously your resume is quite strong. You've a fantastic background in the industry. Where did it all start, and where did your love for strength and condition and physical health come about?
I was born into it. That's the simple answer. I am the son of an athletic director. My dad, Dr. James Rusin, was an athletic director of 27 schools in the Western New York area, in the northern part of America. And I was born into it. When I was born, my dad was a little bit older. He was 43 years old. He was the man, and he was bringing me to the field. He was bringing me to the court. When I was in 5th and 6th grade, I was playing with the varsity teams in practice because he was just pushing me in there. And I played every sport. I did every activity. I was in the weight room. I was everywhere. So I had this upbringing that was extraordinarily rare because I was inundated with so much good coaching and information as a child. And I knew that that was going to be my thing. That was what I was going to eventually do. But in between doing that and coming up like that, I was a Division I baseball player myself here in America. And I ended up spending the first 10 years of my career working with professional and Olympic sports because I was still into the sport. I was still into the mix of being a competitor. And that's what I really love to do still. But I think as the years went on, we're looking at competition in a little bit different lens, and we're looking at performance in a different lens. But I would say that this was the thing that I was meant to do.
John, when you were in these competitions, how was your body during it? Were you getting these niggles and stuff, and did that lead towards what you have done now, or how were you feeling in competition time?
Great question. So I have 2 catastrophic injuries in my playing career. Senior year of high school, I have a UCL injury in my throwing arm. I actually blew out my throwing arm, and that kept me out of the Major League Baseball draft. I still had my scholarship to go to college, but really never the same after that. Didn't have the right rehab, didn't have the right care, and definitely didn't have the right protocols moving forward in order to rebuild myself stronger without surgery. So that was the first man, this really sucks. And then sophomore year of college, I tore my opposite side non-throwing arm UCL. And I am a statistic of all statistics because there are not many people walking this earth today with bilateral UCL tears. And that was actually the last baseball game I had ever played. And that was one that was an eye-opener because at the time I was training more intelligently. I did have strength and conditioning coaches that knew what they were doing, but it didn't necessarily seem to matter. So that left me with a lot of questions and chasing down answers. And I was in a good spot to be, which was at a Division I strength and conditioning school. I was going for exercise science and kinesiology and pre-med. And I had a lot of academics and education at my disposal where I was trying to solve my own problems originally.
You're looking at that through a lens of hindsight, which is fantastic. But at the time, John, can I ask, as someone who's tried to become a professional in sport myself, and at that age when you get an injury and it's sometimes you just need an element of luck, how did you deal with the mental side of being so close, you can almost taste it, and then to be I suppose the freak injury, to have 2 of the same injury in different arms? How did you deal with it? Because I know now you're saying I jumped straight into the studies, but there has to be a week or 2 where you were like, oh, what now? How did you deal with that on the mental side?
Oh, it was more than a week or 2. It was years. It was years. And interestingly enough, after 3 years of undergraduate studies, they were like, hey, John, you had really awesome grades. I don't know if you know this or not. You can redshirt and try to get back onto the baseball field, or we can just allow allow you to graduate and you can be on to your next endeavor. And it took a day or two and I was like, fuck it, we're going to go in and we're going to graduate. And I ended up taking a job at that same university, ended up right in the weight room, essentially training my my teammates and other different Olympic sport. And I still had the athlete's mentality. And I knew I had the athlete's mentality because I was doing things egotistically to try to still compete with the athletes that I was managing. I was on the women's basketball scout team. I was trying to beat their ass 2 times per week. And I was like, why am I doing this? Like, I'm a certified strength and conditioning specialist. Like, what am I doing on the scout team? And just trying to outlift my athletes and doing things a little bit immaturely. But I think that we all go through this transition point between being an athlete and being a coach into the point where we can be selfless with our work with another, as opposed to always being driving forward with our own physical pursuits. But I do think that took me a good 4 or 5 years in order to make that switch. Whereas today I look back on it and I'm like, oh my God, what was I doing back then? I was a little bit embarrassed, but also it's hard to get those competitive juices out of your system. But as soon as I found that I could have success with other people the same way as I had with myself, and it gave me the same feeling, then I was addicted and I just wanted to coach more and more.
It's kind of like the identity of being the competitive athlete, the Division 1 athlete. You're trying to beat everyone. You've been competing since you've been young age, and it's changing that identity, I suppose. And a lot of athletes will struggle with that, into that coaching mindset and becoming the coach. It is a difficult transition, which you've said, but when you found creating that identity, how good was your relationship then with the athletes when you weren't competing with them anymore?
It was really good, but I still, in my essence, was an athlete at heart. And I think that allowed me to speak the language. It allowed me to gain the respect of a lot of my athletes because I had been where they were, but I'm also young enough and strong enough and, cool enough at the point in time. I'm not a cool person, but back then I was compared to everybody else that's 50 or 60 years old. Whereas they wanted to come in and work with me. And I think some of my earliest opportunities to go big with some big star athletes when I started working out in Southern California was simply because I had a baseball background and people respected that if they were a professional baseball player. And that's how I gained a vast majority of my professional clientele early on. It was just an association between, hey, John has a doctorate in physical therapy, has degrees in exercise science and kinesiology. But the kicker was, hey, he's a baseball guy. And if he's a baseball guy, he understands me because that's the sport that I play. And that transferred into working with a lot of overhand sport athletes. That transferred into doing a hybrid model between, injury prevention and also strength and conditioning. And really the early models of what I do today at a larger scale.
It must be hard to get at the start, get athletes bought into the injury prevention model. Like in your book, you talk about the Australian Open. You see the meticulous kind of like the sport, and then when it comes to the training, not so much. Like I was in the marathon starting line over the weekend, and there's 3 types of people. One, they're doing their runs up and down, the different karaokes and all the rest, and okay, they're going for elite time. One is having the banana and trying to get as much food as they can before they start. And the other is doing different calf raises and stuff. And initially it looks like, they're actually smart. They're doing activation work. But the more starting lines I've been on, the more I realize, they're having injury and they're just hoping that doesn't blow, because that's usually me doing the calf raises and stuff and the curbs and everything else. So for those people, how do you talk about like warm-ups and getting into that mindset before the start of like a race, I suppose, get more into running? Or like how does the warm-up of getting into the sport, doing the general stuff, the foam rolling, the stretches, how do you get people into that?
It's really hard to talk somebody into making a behavior change. I'm not in the business of doing that.
Unless you're bribing me with food, John, I'm not doing
it. But really, people have to learn on their own. As bad as this sounds, people have to deal with adversity. They have to deal with challenges, and many times they can't fix their own challenges or overcome their own adversities, and then they look for something different. Vast majority of the people that come in with me, including my runners and my triathletes, they have hit a plateau. They are in pain. They are unable to go in and train on the volumes that is necessary to compete. And then all of a sudden they go, holy shit, I need to do something different. And usually something different is the rule of opposites. All the things that I was doing, I've been avoiding the things that I need to do in order to go in and compete pain-free again. And that's where the rebuild phases come in, and they know very well that something has to happen. And it's usually not a great day if you're coming in and talking to me. It means that you've plateaued, you're burned out, you're hurt, absolutely, and you know that this is a crossroads. And the crossroads for many of my clients and my athletes are they're at risk of not being able to do what they love to do ever again. Or they're not able to do it at the level that has them mentally and emotionally locking into being able to better their lives. And that is scary for people. That's scary for people. For any runner out there, imagine not running for the rest of your life. That is a worst case scenario. And I think that's what many people are dealing with when they come to me. And that's why the behavior change is a little bit easier, especially for my specific demographic and clientele, because they're ready for it. They seek it out and they know exactly what they're going to be getting when they come in and work with me.
A lot of runners would say, when an injury happens, we constantly hear in the podcast, I should have stretched more. I didn't do any stretching, more so than gym work. Like they need to stretch more, yes, but you also have a chapter on like my hamstrings are tight. And we hear it all the time. Runners' hamstrings are tight constantly. So what we do, we try and touch our toes. It doesn't get better, and I've been guilty of it. What should runners do?
The hierarchy of injury prevention doesn't start with the foundation of stretching. Just calling that out. Stretching is a part of the puzzle, but it is not this be-all, end-all of all things injury prevention and health. It simply isn't. If it was, everyone who's doing their hamstring stretches on the bumper of their car before they go out for their 5K wouldn't get hurt that day. What we need to be thinking about is what we can implement with a minimal effective dose to get us the type of training stimulus that we want with a protective mechanism. In my opinion, that's going in and, again, training the opposite physical characteristics, the opposite positions, the opposite loading capacities as you are naturally getting in your sport. And that is counterintuitive to almost anything that anyone would think in terms of a sport-specific program, because that has gotten so hot today. But many times, if we just simply lack the foundation of moving like a human being, if we lack the foundation of being a well-rounded, pain-free athlete, then we have a really hard time when it goes into specialized volumes and when that pre-race and that preseason gets into in-season and we can't withstand the stress of performance, or we can't repeat bout performance. But really, it comes down to strength, it comes down to mobility, and it comes down to unlocking your movement system and putting a lot more emphasis on the things that aren't naturally getting hit with your current sport.
And when you let's look at athletes, student athletes as well. Obviously, they're doing a hell of a lot of training. They've got great coaches like yourselves as well. And then you've got the other bracket of athlete or the wannabe athletes who probably don't have the access to that kind of coaching. They do their training. Some of them are, particularly in Ireland, where we wouldn't necessarily have the same student programs as you would in the US. In fact, a lot of our Irish runners go to the US to become NCAA runners and be a part of these phenomenal programs to develop their career. But when we look at those athletes that we'll talk about in Ireland who are getting up at 6 a.m., they're probably doing something again in the evening, but then they're studying engineering, or like you, they're doing a physical therapist course, they're doing whatever it is, a medical degree. And they're sitting 8 hours a day, and probably the last thing they want to do is strength and conditioning. You mentioned the behavior change. The carrot, I suppose, is to be able to excel in the sport. But what kind of, and I talk about timing and time management, how many times should these athletes be endeavoring to hit a strength and conditioning session, or do we add in micro sessions throughout the day to supplement their training? I know that's a very vast question, John, and every athlete is individual, but how, in a general statement, how can athletes or student athletes or even working athletes manage their strength and condition and change that behavior one small step at a time?
Bare minimum, the frequency is 2 times per week, whether you're in season or whether you're off season. That is the starting point for gaining and maintaining. So we're thinking about 2 times per week, anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes. If you're already a runner, you don't need to be strength and conditioning over 60 minutes per session. That's absolute craziness. And we just need to have a more well-rounded approach when we get into it. A little bit goes a long way in terms of being able to load the movement patterns, being able to have a more hybridized approach in terms of power and hypertrophy hypertrophy and mobility on top of the strength training, and being able to make sure that we're recoverable for your sport. So many times when I manage runners, we just need to find what is recoverable. So the first thing that we put in is, of course, their sport-specific running schedule. And then there we dabble into the frequencies, the volumes, the intensities, and then how we cycle that, usually at a 4 to 8 week period in terms of being able to acclimate to that specific stress. But really, we need to be getting in at least 2 times per week. But again, we don't need to be doing 2 to 3 hour sessions like Ronnie Coleman and thinking that that's the strength training that a runner needs. That's the polar opposite of what we need. We essentially need to have the law of reversal, which is train the positions that we're not already getting, make sure that we're reversing the chronic postures that you're in during the day, and also with all the anterior load that we have with a gait-based sport like running, is that we have to really hone in on the posterior chain, the pull patterns at the upper body, the hip hinge at the lower body, really loading through the hamstrings, the glutes, and the lower back and the upper back directly, and being able to build a strong and sturdy posterior to be able to support our front side endeavors.
I find most runners do a few squats, lunges, the complete opposite, and that's it. They move on. It's crazy, but when you put it like that and you realize what they actually need to do, it's mad. One of our most popular questions on strength when this comes up is the day you program that. So usually most runners still have one, maybe a long run of the weekend and a higher intensity run somewhere during the week, and they don't know how to place it with rest and getting 2 gym sessions in. Do you have any, I know, like Eric said, everyone's different, but do you have any standard recommendations when it comes to that?
Yes. So this is an extraordinarily common question. And what I tend to do with my runners that say they have 3 to 4 runs per week, common sense would say we're going to put 2 to 3 strength training sessions in on those off days. Duh. But how do we actually break it down? Before your long runs, we need to make sure that our lower body directed volume and the squat pattern, the hinge pattern, and the single leg patterns are pulled back a little bit. So we don't have that cumulative fatigue in the system before your long run. So that is more an upper body directed session with higher intensities for lower body work, but not a whole lot of volume because we're going to get that volume in on your long run. And before your high intensity run sessions, that's where we can bring up our volumes a little bit on those squat hinge lunge patterns at the lower body and have more of an equalized full body session that happens between the upper and lower body. And then that third session is really a blend between both. You have a little bit more of the ability to kind of be halfway in between. Push all your foundational movement patterns, push them for strength and most likely mobility, and you just get this really well-rounded base approach. So really one session is pushing intensity high at upper body and volume low at lower body, and then you flip that, and then you have one session that's right in between. And that would be like the usual 3-day per week session that we would do with a full body emphasis with our runners that are running 4 days per week.
When you say volume low for lower body, but do you still mean intensity high in terms of percentages of strength, for example? Like when some people might hear, oh, low volume, lower body, and they do it, and it's like a 4 or 5 out of 10 effort, that kind of thing, because John said lower volume in this, but I find like runners have a different interpretation of what that means. Am I right in saying that you might just do 1 or 2 sets? They're still going to be difficult, but because the volume's not there, they're not going to be taxing when it comes to the running session later.
Correct. So, the things that you're looking at with any sort of training program, whether it be sport specific or general fitness, is that you're managing frequency, how many times per week, you're managing the overall volume, which is like, simply put, how many hard working sets are you doing? And then you're managing intensity. It's not percentage based intensity. It's like, man, how hard was that set? Like, did it tax me and did it get a neurological and a mechanical fatigue factor in it? And then when we're talking about lower volume, really that's anywhere from like 4 to 6 working sets. And that is it. We're not doing 25 working sets and then going out for a run the next day. That's just insane. But we need to be going a little bit as a long way. But volume and intensity, they go up and down on a toggle switch. As one goes down, the other one needs to go up in terms of us getting an overall training effect that can actually stimulate and get us better and have us moving forward in terms of our performance. So thinking about it like that a little bit more simply, these are going to be short and sweet sessions. They're going to be high amount of quality because movement quality absolutely matters the most. We're going to be putting a lot of effort in, but we're going to be holding the reins on the garbage volume. We're also going to be holding the reins on just the overall cumulative fatigue because we're gonna get that naturally with our sport specific running.
When it comes to one of the things you're known for on Instagram is that on the wall in the background, squat, hinge, lunge, push, pull, carry. When it comes to your runners and triathletes, and I know it's like a general kind of person, that a runner that's not in the gym that much knows that they need help with gym work. Do you have a go-to exercise for those kind of six that would usually 78% of the time be for that runner?
Yeah. Goblet squats for the squat pattern. If you can go heels elevate, full range of motion goblet squats, those are going to be amazing for runners because it gets you into positions that you never are in with the gait cycle. For the hinge, we want to stretch the hamstrings. We want to activate the glutes. We want a hard isometric at the lower back. The best possible way to do that is with Romanian deadlift variations. It doesn't always have to be a barbell. I'm a huge fan of kettlebells and dumbbells for that because it seems to be a little bit more spine sparing compared to the barbell. For the single leg work, it doesn't have to be super sexy. Basic ass split squats work extraordinarily well. And if we want to get a little bit more fancy, being able to go through full range of motion with elevation at the front and the back foot to be able to have full knee flexion, full hip flexion with that split squat. Upper body directed work is going to be a lot of push-ups to be able to have scapular recruitment and scapular dynamic stability, and a lot of row-based patterns and horizontal pulls, including face pulls, single arm rows, inverted rows, and really anything to be able to get more volume on the back side of the body than front side of the body. And then we need a little bit of decompression. So if the runners have the relative strength to go up and start knocking out things like pull-ups, I like neutral grip pull-ups, and I like chin-up based variations there because we get a lot of full body strength recruitment. We have a lot of core recruitment there, and it's also a relative strength test, meaning that body comp really does matter, and it's going to really be more of a victory route for runners that are most likely more lean than a vast majority of the people out there.
Ab exercises, John. A lot of people go, a few sit-ups, few crunches, sure, make the six packs look good. We're getting the body fat down for runs. Summer is coming, that kind of thing. What's your thoughts on that for runners and in general doing your crunches, your sit-ups, your leg raises, and different things like that? And I suppose almost like Eric said, really, in terms like runners are thinking, summer's coming, the tank top might be on, or t-shirt might be off, or someone might be doing high rocks even, and you can't. I looked up the rule book. You cannot do a high rocks wearing a t-shirt. It's just you just can't do it. I've been guilty of it. It's impossible. The air conditioning's on in those rooms. It's off in those rooms. T-shirt has to come off. What's your thoughts on sit-ups and crunches?
I don't program a ton of them for runners, if I'm being completely honest. Anything that is forward spine flexion and anything that is really hip flexor emphasized, those are things that we stay away from because we don't want to have a chronic pain point there already, and we don't want to overload that chronic pain point. And both crunches and things like leg raises, it tends to shorten the thing that we want to lengthen, and it tends to neglect the thing that we're trying to get stronger. When it comes to core work for runners, it's all about the lateral line. So we do a lot of side plank variations. We do a lot of Copenhagen's and marching. Anything that gets at the adductors, the lateral side glutes, and the obliques, those are going to be awesome. Specifically for the obliques and not just like the six-pack muscle. Those are things that allow us to breathe and be able to exchange air more effectively. So if we can actually get those strong and we can actually have a mind-muscle connection with those, we can actually take the dimmer switch when we get into our gait itself, when we get back onto the road. But if we have no mind-muscle connection in terms of how to actually manage the core structure, it's really difficult in order to get past the fatigue factor when we are trying to push towards PR-based times.
When you're talking about that, because we have mentioned athletes are usually looking for the extra 1%, and those who are listening to this now are thinking, okay, when I run a 5K best effort, I always feel it in my diaphragm, I'll feel it in my hips, I'll feel it in the side, and it feels like I can't breathe and there is no association. So obviously, having listened to what you said, something has tweaked with me that maybe I need to be focusing on these kind of exercises. When you're talking to athletes and they find, or maybe we've got the hybrid athlete or a triathlete where swimming core, running, cycling all comes in, how difficult then is it to manage strength and condition when you've got such a range of sports with a triathlete?
Yeah, it's 3 times harder. I would say it's 3 times harder than a runner. And it's because we only have so much to give throughout a training week in terms of our energy and our recoverability. So we need to be on pulse on almost every 12 hours because many of my triathletes, they'll get up in the morning and they'll do one piece of the sport, and then they'll strength train in the afternoons. And they're like crazy people, they'll go out and hit a swim or hit a bike later on when the traffic's down. And all of a sudden you're managing 2 to 3 training sessions per day. And there's a lot of variance person to person. There's a lot of variance in terms of the ability to fuel optimally around that. And really, we have very little leeway in terms of external sport stress cycles. So sleep was off, that can take you down for the next 48 hours. Your nutrition's off, that can take you down for the next 72 hours. So it really has to be on pulse. But I would say that it is most important for our triathletes to be strength and conditioning, especially when they are getting into these higher volumes, because we need to be able to withstand a huge amount of volume and stress on the body. It's easy to do early in the season, but anyone who I'm managing that has anywhere from a 4 to 6 month competition season, the goal is not to just compete in the first race. The goal is to be able to thrive throughout that 4 to 6 months. That is a lot harder. And that's more of like the pseudo professional triathlete that really wants to go in and excel.
And it's really important for them because as they look for Olympic and World Cup qualifications, they obviously have to win a lot of points in races all over the world. So you're adding in flights, travel, continents, different time zones, as well as trying to maintain peak performance. And as you said, that season could last over a period of 5 to 10 weeks.
Yeah. It's very difficult. And I live in Madison, Wisconsin, and we have one of the international Ironman qualifiers here with Ironman Wisconsin. And every year I'll go and I'll maybe have like an athlete or two that will do that race. They'll be prepped for it. We'll be feeling good about it. It's low stress. But I'll see everyone else and I'm like, holy shit, what is about to happen? There's people that have like never been swimming. They think they're just going to go swim. They get dragged out of the water. We have people that haven't biked more than 10 miles in their life. They're on the bikes and they're getting pulled off the road. We have people that are crawling in over the line, almost a day has passed and they're still finishing, crawling in. That just doesn't look like fun to me. And also, it's not only not fun, but does that really do something for the mental up here? Did you really go out and do what you needed to do? Or did you just break down your body because you didn't prepare properly? That's what I'm seeing a vast majority of the time here in Wisconsin. And it's probably not isolated just to Wisconsin here. But there's a big difference between being intelligent about your training, intelligent about your strength and conditioning, intelligent about your entire race prep, and going in and being able to get that race done, compete in it, and then walk away pain-free. That's my goal with my clients. Anyone could go out there and like mentally like forge through, but can you leave the race and can you go have a beer with your friends and the next morning wake up and take your son to soccer? That's what we're looking at still doing, because even with a lot of these high-end athletes in our marathoners and in our triathletes, they're not professionals. They are professional businessmen. They are teachers. They are lawyers. They are doctors. They have lives. And we need to make sure that we're actually making feel good and function well in some of these professions in their family life as well. I think that's the big thing that people miss. They don't train properly, and then it takes away everything else in the other 20 hours of the day. And that's just no life to live, in my opinion, as a coach.
I just have a follow-up on that because when it comes on the preparation side, we will see on Instagram a lot of people turning around and saying, if you're not up at 4 a.m., you're behind. If you're not going to bed at 2 a.m., you're behind. You've just mentioned sleep is probably one of the most important factors because it can have an impact over a week of training, particularly with top triathletes who are maybe training 19 times in a week, which is a massive load on the body. When we look at preparation and let's go from amateur up to peak performance, obviously there's a stark difference. How long is too long and how short is too short? And how do we manage? Because a lot of people are picking up apps which have AI in the background, which are programming in runs. They don't really know your background, your ability. And people are using it as gospel and they're taking on these races and getting involved. But how long is too long? How do people know how to prep? And more importantly, as your book is Pain-Free Performance, how do you go about starting yourself or building a good base to start preparing for this kind of stuff?
Sleep is the number one. We are going to prioritize sleep over almost anything else. I have triathletes and I have runners that are sleeping up to 10 and a half hours per night. And we're like, good because the next day their HRV is looking good, the recoverability scores are looking good, they're out there performing. I have people as low as maybe like 7.5 hours. I hate to say that because everyone's going to go, oh, that's minimal effective dose for sleeping. It's really not. But I've seen like the science will say about 7.5 hours of time in bed is about the lowest end of that threshold. But really, we need to be prioritizing this above all else because it doesn't really matter what your nutrition's like. It doesn't really matter how high of a quality of your training is. If we can't have a accumulation of sleep and recoverability, then everything else doesn't really seem to matter very much. So that is a huge one for us. In America here, we're in the middle of the World Series, and Shohei Ohtani, one of the best athletes in human history. He pitches, he bats, he does everything. And there was just a report that he's sleeping 10.5 hours per night, and he's doing a 2-hour nap midday. That is what a high-performing athlete does, and that is why you just made $750 million USD in the next 10 years of your contract, because you are preparing the mind, the body, and your energy to be able to go out and compete. But I think sleep is just so important. And we do have a lot of really nice data metrics to be able to monitor sleep right now. But the AI-based stuff, as you said, Eric, there's a lot of holes in it right now. When you go back to biomonitoring, there's a lot of good data out there. We just need to know how to use it.
I heard even like a LeBron James spent like a 1.5 million USD on recovery and stuff like that. But we've touched a lot on strength. The other part is conditioning that I want to touch on a little bit, because you talk about metrics, and a metric I'm hearing a lot is VO2 max. So, and you hear like Norwegian protocols, 4x4, that kind of thing for increasing your VO2 max. When it comes specifically to runners and triathletes, should they be doing a small bit of that in the gym, or is it like, hang on, you get your cardio from your sport outside?
I tend to really toggle back in terms of any cardio or conditioning in a hybridized strength and conditioning plan for a runner or a triathlete. I see that they have a huge amount of training load on their system already in those two physical characteristics. The last thing that we need to do is try to push them down on the Airdyne bike and get that up. Off season's a totally different story. I think that there are anywhere from like 20 to maybe 35 minutes per week of exposure into those higher threshold zones, zone 4, zone 5 work with recovery periods in between to be able to hopefully elevate that VO2 max. But there's only so much stress the body can take. So in season, we pull it right out. Off season, we sprinkle it in, knowing very well that there is no true off season for a runner.
John, what's your thoughts on, I know it from the book, but you always hear things about stretching being no good, and the other thing that I see that's fallen back from years ago is foam rolling. But you have a good bit of section on the book on foam rolling. You have the QR codes of foam roll, different parts there. Why are you a proponent of foam rolling?
So there's 3 different ways that we'll use foam rolling and stretching, aka mobility work, inside of a pain-free performance plan. The first one is your pre-training prep. Pre-training prep is 1 to 2 minutes of targeted work on some soft tissue tool. It doesn't have to be a foam roller, but that's the most common. And then we'll follow up that region that just got hit with the soft tissue work with some quality mobilizations through an extended range of motion. We use something called the oscillatory technique, which is essentially like a form of controlled dynamic stretching. Again, we're doing 1 to 2 minutes of that. So maybe 3 to 4 total minutes before you go in to train. That is where I'd use soft tissue work and stretching before a training session. But I think the gold, especially for endurance sport athletes, is the mechanisms of recoverability. With doing foam rolling and soft tissue work a little bit differently, doing longer passes, more extended breaths as you're going through, being able to really identify some of those chronic tight spots and pain points, and being able to have that stimulus, that external stimulus into the body, really relax and recover and get us back into a parasympathetic state. Also, I think static stretching is back in terms of recoverability because we have really nice science behind that, especially if we couple soft tissue work and static stretching together. As long as we're in nice prime positions in terms of spinal neutrality or close to neutral, we're not just doing piss poor work. We have the ability to go up and extend some of these stretches 3 to 5 minutes, be able to breathe through them, and again, tap into the parasympathetic state, but also have it be an active recovery mechanism. My endurance sport athletes will have them do this for 10 to 15 minutes every single night when they lay down before bed, or if they're watching Netflix and just chilling out. We'll get a little bit of recoverability work in, but I think the key to make sure that foam rolling and stretching are working properly is that we're managing our breath cycle. We want to be in a parasympathetic state, meaning that we want long inhalations, even longer exhalations, and we want to be in a calm and controlled environment. If we can do that, that is a huge amount of active recovery that we can get in that does not add to the stress load of the entire training week. So it can actually reduce some of the stress load, and that's a beautiful thing, especially when the volumes are flying high.
I seen one of you had a 30-day course or something, and you had different stretches for different body parts each day. And I was doing one of them, and it was like pigeon stretch. And I was like, hang on, does that say a minute on each side? I'm like, my God. And then breathing into it. And of course, I kept it going for 2-3 weeks, felt great. And then for some reason stopped because I'm an idiot runner who felt great.
Free.
I was paying free.
Goal
was
is
like,
achieved.
mission accomplished. And I'll never deal with that injury again. And of course, it'll happen again to me. So you're saying when you come to your stretches, it's not just like 15, 20 seconds next to a car before you go out for a run. It's a minute, 2 minutes. You even said 3 to 5 minutes of deep stretching.
After your session.
After.
So you have all the time in the world. After training's done, that's the time to recover. So the goal is no longer performance. The goal is recovery. So you can extend the amount of stretches in terms of duration out, and you can hit more spots on the foam roller. You just have more time and more chill mode. But in terms of pre-training prep, we're going 1, maybe 2 minutes on the foam roller, 1, maybe 2 minutes on the stretching. We are not static stretching before any performance sessions, whether it be in the gym or on the road. What we're doing is something called the dynamic oscillatory stretch, which is essentially going on and off end range to try to give an oscillation to get some kinesthetic biofeedback into the system to be able to loosen up some of the tonicity and the localized musculature, but also have the brain-body connection, just like take off that internal parking brake a little bit. We can lubricate the joints, we can prep the musculotendinous junctions, and the body thrives with movement. So even with something like stretching, if you are doing a form of stretching before training, make sure that there's a little bit of a movement base in it.
Is there a sweet spot, John, or what is the science saying? Okay, I finish a run, it's in Ireland, so the probability it's raining is probably 100%. We get into the car because I'm cold, I'm wet, I'm hungry, but have I made a fundamental mistake? Is there a sweet spot where we need to stretch? I know, for example, to balance blood sugars, maybe within 30 minutes, let's take on some fuel after doing a long run. But when it comes to that deep stretching you're talking about and that recovery, is there a sweet spot in time, or is it a case of get home, get showered, relax, and it's your time then in the evening to do it?
In the perfect scenario, you're going to use something called the 3-phase cool down. 3-phase cool down is going to be deep diaphragmatic breathing out of a posturally sound position. We like people laying down on their backs. Specific to runners, we put their legs into elevation, something like a bench or a chair. You elevate the feet up. We do that for anywhere from 2 to 3 minutes, and we try to get that heart rate as low as possible. Again, you just got done with a run. You're in a sympathetic drive. We want to get out of that sympathetic red line drive as fast as possible. The best thing that we can do is position our body on the ground contact, and we're able to get the breath reduced in terms of breath per minute. That is something that we'll do, and even if you are in the car, do that. That is the most important thing. All the other stuff can wait. You can get your mobility working and your foam rolling before you go to bed on TV. The compounding effect of doing this thing day in, day out is going to be the big benefit. But I do believe that if you do have the time and it is not raining in Ireland, then you can go 2 to 3 minutes of deep breathing. And then you go 2 to 3 minutes of whatever got pounded in that run. You're like, oh man, my hip flexors are on fire. Let's get the foam roller on those bad boys and continue to breathe deep and get some soft tissue work in. And then do something like a rear foot elevated hip flexor stretch or a half kneeling adductor rock stretch, something that actually mobilizes that area so we can actually start to recover it before the sweat on your face is even dried. So I think that is going to be optimal. But if bare minimums are just make sure you get your heart rate down into a recoverable zone, continue on with your day, and make sure you get a little bit of active recovery work in.
I want to touch on what a runner needs to do when they get your book. But before that, to go full circle, at the start of that race, that marathon or whatever it is, or let's say 10K or more, and you have 10, 15 minutes, you've got the heart rate up. Maybe you're smarter than me and Eric. You've done 2, 3K to get the heart rate up, and you know you're going to go for a PB effort. What, if any, exercises or what should they be doing 5, 10 minutes before that race starts, do you recommend?
If you have the book, go through the locomotion-based 6-phase dynamic warm-up. It'll take you 10 to 12 minutes. It'll get you a little bit of soft tissue. It will mobilize your system. It will activate the running stride, and it will get your nervous system ready for performance. That's a system that I really like to run for our pre-training prep and our pre-race prep. And that's something that I don't think you should do that like you've never done it before, and you're like, oh man, this 5K is going to be different. This is something that you should be doing routinely for weeks, if not months before, to be able to acclimate to the benefits of the system and actually see a lot of the benefits from it compounding over time in order for you to be normalized into this is my routine and this is what I've practiced, and now it's time to be able to go in and race.
Book is an absolute monster. It's like 600 pages and it can be so overwhelming. Like I got a week ago, I'm like, I'll go through all of this before the podcast. So where can people get the book?
Amazon in
Amazon.
any country. You can look it up, Pain-Free Performance, John Rusin, and you should be able to get it hopefully same day.
Absolutely brilliant.
John, it's one thing, obviously, and it's a great gift for us runners. And as Sean said, 600 pages can be overwhelming. For runners who navigate it, what's the first page they should turn open?
You're going to go right to section 4, and section 4 is going to have the roadmap of how you start training. My highest recommendation is doing the dumbbell and bands program as a 3-time per week program. It'll take you 30 to 40 minutes. It will complete everything in terms of your characteristics and your movement patterns. If you want a little bit more of a gym-based workout, do the 3-day functional full body, and that is going to be your recipe. Even if you do it 1 to 2 days, the 3-day full functional is what you want to be doing. Then from there, go into section 2 and identify your 6-phase warm-up that is specific to your pain point. Is it your hamstring that's always cramping up? Is it your hip flexors that are on fire? Is your posture and your lower back just suck? You can go after specific pain points with the 6-phase system and be able to couple the program that you just chose with the 6-phase system to get healthy. And then if you want to go above and beyond, look at your movement patterns, screen them out, figure out how your body uniquely works for your body type, and be able to move as best as possible for your specific nature. And it was never meant to read like a novel where you're like, oh man, page 1 to page 600. We know people are going to go get the programs. We know they're going to get out of pain. And then they're going to go in and start referencing things as they peel back the onion a little by little. You know, my goal of this was to be a coffee table book for every single athlete and every single person that exercises. Because as we know, there are going to be aches, pains, and injuries that come along. This is going to be the roadmap to get out of those and to be training stronger for the get-go.
Out of every sport, running is the most injured I've ever been. So it is the absolute go-to for anyone listening right now. I've gone through some of the book. It is absolutely brilliant. And it's the off-season for a lot of people now. Double marathon's just done. If you're looking at your strength training and stuff like that, this is the book you should get and get started from now. With that said, John, it's been absolutely brilliant having the podcast this week. And that is it for this week's episode of the Any Given Monday podcast. For myself, John, and Eric, take care.